What's the deal with these venur? I asked. Every Andalite knows the story of the venur, X began. In fact, the story of the venur has much to do with the modern Andalite policies and methods of interstellar interactions. Tell us the story, Axe, Jake said. Obviously, none of us can sleep, and we have to demorph soon anyway. So what do you know about the venur? Just what everyone knows, he said. I mean what any Andalite knows. They were a primitive species with a highly unusual physiology. Unique, actually. They did not seem to require radiant energy of any kind. Obviously, they are not carbon-based. Oh, obviously, I mocked. They were discovered back towards the dawn of Andalite space travel. Not by us, by some other race. The Five. The Five what? Cassie asked. No one knows. They just called themselves the Five. No doubt it meant something to them. Maybe they lived between the Four and the Six, I suggested. Anyway, the Five discovered the venur and began to trap and export them. Say what? They basically harvested the venur. It seems that when a venur melts, burns, in any case becomes liquid at temperature above freezing, and the resulting liquid has many uses, particularly in the creation of superconductors for the primitive computers of that era. But these are sentient creatures, aren't they? Cassie asked. Yes, X said simply. They were. The Five extinguished them. They annihilated a sentient species to speed up their computers. The venur disappeared. Oh, that's sickening, Cassie said. That's just evil. Yes, Axe agreed. But if it is any comfort, the Five are no longer in existence either. Soon after we encountered them for the first time, well, no one knows for certain what happened to the Five, but the Andalites in that era are not the Andalites of today. I find this story pretty interesting, as it kind of helps us understand how the Yeerks came to be. If the Andalites of yesteryears were ashamed of wiping out the Five in their early days of space travel, it goes to explain their dangerously optimistic attitude to other alien species when they discovered the Yeerk homeworld. It kind of puts the Andalite race in a spot of emotional turmoil. Their committing of genocide was clearly wrong, while their attempts at being generous blew up in their face. I mean, what's a species to do? This is substantially less interesting. I suspect that because of the temperatures on Venbia, the Yeerks were able to retrieve some intact genetic material from the venur corpses. So they regrew them? Probably they coupled the venur DNA with some other species. These would be a hybrid, part venur, part something else. What else? Cassie asked. Axe hesitated. You would want to use a species with the most complex DNA structure available. It would make it easier to attach new DNA. And what creature would that be? Tobias asked. Of the species available to the Yeerks, Axe said, humans. These venur may be a hybrid of venur and humans. What? Why? How the hell does that make sense? First off, why do they need to couple venur DNA with anything? This isn't Jurassic Park where the DNA samples were fractured from being millions of years old. Timeline-wise, this whole thing with the venur and the Five might as well happen to a week ago. If the DNA strands aren't degraded, then what the hell is the point of combining the venur with anything? Secondly, why did they choose humans? Because they had the most complex DNA structure? Well, how the hell can you determine that? What about Andalites? The simple fact that Andalites have genetic telepathy suggests being a bit more complex, yes? But even then, I don't see how venur and humans are the least bit compatible. Human beings are carbon-based species, and the venur are not. They're probably silicon-based. Human beings are warm-blooded and maintain a body temperature that would be lethal to the venur. And who knows what else that comes naturally to humans might be lethal to these things. And then there's the implication of the Yeerks making these venur clones. We've seen the Yeerks mess around with genetic modifications before, probably using stolen technology from the Arn, but this goes a long way from installing ear canals into hammerhead sharks. If the Yeerks are capable of resurrecting dead alien species like this, then what's stopping them from cloning Andalites for host bodies, or making brand new killer invasion monsters? This whole idea just seems to be an attempt to heighten the horror of these creatures, but it's really very unnecessary and doesn't go anywhere. Anyway, the next immediate danger is finding food, which comes in the form of a polar bear hunting a seal. Once the bear leaves, the Animorphs rush over and chow down on the leftovers, but not before having a little issue with Cassie. I looked over at Cassie. She had to be freaked out by what none of us had the nerve to suggest we were suggesting. I mean, I was freaked out by what we were not suggesting. But unlike Cassie, I wasn't willing to let my moral sense live while the rest of me died of starvation. "Cassie," Rachel said. "What?" she replied, a hint of anger in her voice. "What should we do?" "Why are you asking me?" I said, "We're not equipped to hunt in this environment, in these morphs. We're freezing. If we don't eat soon, we'll be too weak to plan our next move, let alone finish what we came here to do, destroy that satellite station." I know this sounds weird, but I'd kind of forgotten that we had a goal. All I'd been thinking about was staying warm and fed, and alive. "But you're waiting for me to give my approval? Is that it?" she said. "Look," I begin again. If I had to be the jerk in this situation, that was fine. I was used to it. I was usually the first one to state the obvious, no matter how ugly it was. Just call me Mr. Ruthless. In case you haven't noticed, there doesn't seem to be a Mickey D's around here. "I noticed that," Cassie said, a little annoyed. "It's obvious what we have to do, and not just to the bear's leftovers, but to any live seal we can find. What I don't understand is why you're asking me for permission. Do you guys think I'd put an animal's life over yours? Or mine, come to think of it?" I don't know," I started to say. "You don't know? When did you start thinking I was some kind of fanatic? We're freezing, we're starving, and I'm going to go all tree-hugging, never eat anything with a face on you?" Yes, Cassie, that's exactly what they're thinking, because that's exactly what you are. I mean, you attacked and killed a Triceratops because of T-Rex hunting instincts, and it freaked you out to the point of quitting. Cassie then goes on a tirade about what exactly her limits are, and the impression I get from this is Jeffrey trying to ground a bit of Cassie's character, trying to deflate the elements that make her so objectable to most people without changing the basic idea of Cassie. I approve, but it doesn't really stick, sadly. "Axe, Tobias, what about you guys?" Jake said. They were both stuck on my skin somewhere. "Actually," Axe replied sheepishly, "I am not hungry." Me neither," Tobias mumbled. "What?" said Rachel. "How can't you be hungry?" Then, "Oh." "I apologize, Marco," Axe said. "The flea's instinct was quite strong." Alright, I might be going overboard with all this, but that moment just begs a lot of questions. If Axe and Tobias demorphed after sucking some blood as a flea, are they still full, or are they hungry again? What happens to food you've eaten when you've morphed? If you remained full, then there isn't really any conflict at all, is there? Everyone should just take turns morphing flea and getting their fill. I am so confused. The Animorphs decide it's high time to get a cold weather morph. Marco and Cassie morph Dolphin and go into the water. It's dangerously cold, but they manage to nab a seal pup in time and drag it onto the surface, where the rest of the Animorphs acquire it. Just as they're enjoying feeling warm again, the two venur appear and chase them off, only for the Animorphs to run headfirst into some orca. The Animorphs are forced to demorph, and such is their luck, they accidentally demorph in front of the one person in the entire Arctic. His name is Derek, an Inuit teenager who almost speaks perfect English and naturally believes the Animorphs to be shape-changing animal spirits because that's what people believed in 1999. The character really isn't a stereotype, but he's so otherwise uninteresting that the almost stereotype aspects of his character really stand out. Derek says he's out here hunting alone, and after talking to him for a little bit, the Animorphs learn that the kid is kind of buddies with the polar bear they saw earlier in a Disney movie kind of way. Well, yeah. They take this opportunity and let Derek lead them to the bear, where Marco and Rachel wrestle it into submission in gorilla and grizzly morphs respectively. Once down, all the Animorphs acquire the bear and start heading towards the Yerk base, while Derek floats off to tell his hometown about the people who can turn into any animal they touch. Because secrecy. What the fuck is that? Oh well, it'll probably be too much of a bummer to kill Derek. So yes, in Polar Bear Morph, the Animorphs make a beeline towards the Yerk base while a snowstorm starts. They reach the base to find more venur assembling a super-duper alien satellite dish. Well, the Animorphs' disguise doesn't last too long. Perhaps they should have been carrying around Coke bottles, and the Yeerks set off the alarm and set the Venber into kill mode. Even as polar bears, the Animorphs aren't much of a match for the Venber. However, one of them trips into a wall of the base and bursts through. The Animorphs rush inside, and the Venber, who are programmed to follow orders until new ones come in, follow them into the warm interior of the base, causing them to quickly melt. We waited till all 8 of the Venber at the base had destroyed themselves. I don't know why. With all the danger, all the terror, someone still needed to be a witness. Someone needed to be able to tell the world about this Yeerk atrocity. Ah, yes, the Animorphs feel a little bit guilty over accidentally wiping this race of genetically altered Venber, even though it really wasn't their fault. I know you guys hate that I keep bringing this up, but Megamorphs 2! Megamorphs 2! Megamorphs 2! Axe manages to hijack a bug fighter and uses its weapons to destroy the base and the satellite dish. They fly out, but have to ditch the ship when the sensors pick up the blade ship on their tail. From there, the Animorphs move south, switching between flying and taking trains, getting home 2 days later. Finally safe, finally warm. Post-book follow-up. Despite its goofy science fiction trappings and a few questionable moments, this book is very solid and an entertaining action piece. It's not all that deep like many of the books that came before it, instead focusing on the action and survival elements, and it does those things really well. As the first ghost-written book, you can tell there are some subtle conflicts with the books that came before it. Either Jeffrey didn't quite understand character motivations or intentionally tried to modify them, though this is not nearly as bad or obvious here as it is in other ghost-written books. In fact, as many nitpicks as I had in this review, most of them came out of the most recent reread. I never noticed these things in my initial read-through more than 10 years ago. I'm not sure if, well, it's problems that are too subtle to be noticed by kids is a positive or negative, but it is what it is. If there is any element I wish that came out of this book, I wish the Animorphs would have finally realized that they might end up in any kind of hostile environment at any moment, and should acquire as many morphs as possible. I'm pretty sure there are polar bears at the gardens. If you had acquired them beforehand, this wouldn't have been nearly as dangerous for these guys. But nope, this aspect is still one of the few things the TV show does better than the books. If this was the worst the ghost-written era ever got, we'd be in good hands. I give Animorphs number 25 The Extreme a 7 out of 10.